Welcome, everybody, to Strategic CRM for Oracle HCM. I see that we have a lot of people joining us here from many places across the globe. So it's great that we can all come together in this forum and talk about recruiting issues like CRM, which is pretty topical these days. And we're here to kind of give you an overview of strategic CRM and what many of our telemetry clients are seeing and what we're developing as best practices as we work in this particular area. My name is Ian Alexander, and I'm joined by Stephen Schwander, who is heads up telemetry's client solutions team. Stephen, good morning.
Hello.
And before we get started here, I want to do a little bit of housekeeping just to let you know we're going to take questions. You can use the question portion of your control panel to chat in your questions. Everybody's muted, so feel free to make as much noise as you want. We can't hear you. But we'll definitely feed in those questions if they're relevant during the presentation, if there's an opportunity. But usually they end up happening towards the end of the presentation, and we take them all at once. But feel free to ask them as they come to you. Talk about the agenda here. We're going to talk about exactly what is strategic CRM. CRM is a term that's used pretty liberally for a lot of different things. So we'll set a good tone and expectation for what exactly we're talking about. We'll talk about some of the recruiting challenges, some of the things that I think we all face as recruiters and recruiting organizations that are really helped by implementing some of these strategic CRM key practices. Again, reasons for implementing CRM strategies, and then really the meat of the presentation, which is talking about these key practices. And finally, Q&A. So, I think at the beginning of any kind of presentation like this, we really got to get clear about what we're talking about. There's a lot of different terminology for different things. So, Stephen, why don't you talk a bit about what exactly is strategic CRM?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to do so. And one of the reasons why I think this is important is that as I come in and work with our clients, it's really funny how many different ideas of CRM are out in the marketplace. So I'll give you an example. We visited a client once, and they said, "Look, we're not interested in the CRM. We just want to be able to find people and send them emails." Okay, and we've worked with others that have much more of a headhunter type background, which is how I started in the business, and really have a deep understanding of direct sourcing and CRM from that perspective. So we really play the gambit. What's really important when we look at strategic CRM for the enterprise world, though, is to be able to meet a number of different definitions of what CRM means within an organization, and to be able to provide the integration and the enterprise class software to be able to get at those business requirements. So basically, if we kind of use this definition of CRM as we work through the day, I think it's going to make sense for us as we hit some of the issues. So it's really using a software solution to capture candidate data, to automate as much of your sourcing as possible, to segment that data so that you can do targeted engagement across large numbers of candidates. And the whole purpose is really so that you can be more proactive in your recruiting processes. So given that, as we break that down a little bit, we use the term talent pool. Mostly, and you'll hear talent network out there, and you'll hear talent community, and you'll hear conversations about how deeply engaged you need to be before a pool turns into a network or into a community. We're just taking a straightforward a definition here that your talent pool is the sum total of all of your candidate data, and we should probably add the caveat that that you can action. Right? Your talent pool is no good to you if it includes resumes that are sitting across desktops all over your organization. That's not going to do any good for you. So very simple definition, a talent pool is all of your candidate data for which you can action. And so sourcing then is really searching for candidates to build that talent pool specifically so that you can invite them to some point when it's appropriate. So talent pool is all of your collective candidate data. Sourcing is being able to search all of your sources to find candidates to invite them to apply. Segmentation is basically organizing your talent pool. Now, I've got a client that when they opened up with us, we brought over 10 million past applicants, and in the past 3 years, they've added about 4 million candidates into that talent pool. That's a lot. So they've got to be able to segment, organize that talent pool into lists, what we might call pipelines or folders, right? Or pipeline them against jobs, or create targeted talent networks around, things like job, family, location, etc., so that they know how to with them. And then finally, you need a way to engage, right? Typically, it's mass email capability or some sort of social outreach to be able to educate, right? This is who we are. This is what it's like to work here, to influence their decision to apply or to seek application, and then finally to invite them to apply and get them into your applicant tracking process. So that's how we define a strategic CRM as we come into our to our clients. So what are the recruiting challenges that are typically being faced when a client is looking to bring in a CRM? Maybe top is around high cost per hire. We're seeing right now let's say a challenge between number one and number two here, right? But high cost per hire, they're spending too much money on, say, job boards, on recruiting agencies, on pay-per-click advertising, and they want to make sure that number one, if they can perhaps lower their costs, or at the very least be able to leverage the costs that they have. The second is difficulty finding candidates. So, search tools are limited. There's a lot of niche boards out there, and it's difficult, finding candidates ahead of need. Thirdly is disconnected candidate sources, right? So maybe they're using 5, 6, 7, 8 different candidate sources, plus they're attending career fairs and they're getting unsolicited resumes. How do you keep that all in one place so that you can have a really good strategic approach? Limited access to passive candidates. And I know, over the past 5, 10 years, there's been lots of passive candidate. Are there really passive candidates versus poised candidates? But the reality is you need to have a way to organize that candidate data so that you can turn a passive candidate into an active candidate when the time is there. So, for instance, a lot of our clients are looking to work with their past applicants who maybe didn't get a job a year ago or 2 years ago, but are still good candidates for a current position, or as their their portfolio grows, their personal resume grows, they may grow into the right candidate. How do you keep in touch with those folks, right? And then just basically difficulty meeting hiring demand, right? You need ready pipelines of candidates so you can get that job out to market as fast as possible and accelerate that. So those are the recruiting challenges that we see our clients are facing. In addition, a lack of scalable engagement, meaning you might have a system in an ATS, for instance, where you can send out 20, 30, 100 emails at once, but you're not really sure if they're getting delivered, as opposed to having a real scalable solution that, number one, you can accurately search across literally, in our case, tens of millions of candidates. But in addition to that, you can email out as large a segment as you need to. To be able to standardize a process, right? So particularly if you have a larger recruitment team, you have a sourcing team supporting a recruitment team, you want to be able to have a single platform so that you can standardize that process. So as we begin to talk a little bit about CRM strategies, I think it's really important that you sit down with your team and understand what activities you're trying to support. And again, this goes back to the original comment I had that folks aren't necessarily sure what a CRM is, number one. Number two, why they need one. And so some key questions that you're going to ask is, what am I trying to do? Am I trying to enable some recruitment marketing so I can build a central talent pool or engage a central talent pool? Am I trying to go from maybe nothing to really building up a proprietary talent pool? Or perhaps I've got as one of my clients do, 10, 11 million people in there, but I need to engage them because the data is old. Am I trying to build a fresh proprietary talent pool? Or number two, am I trying to support sourcing and recruiting function for a specific opening with a specialized talent, often referred to as maybe purple squirrel recruiting, right? Those difficult to find candidates, or am I just trying to help the sourcing and recruitment function fill higher volume positions, right, where we're inviting large numbers of candidates to apply? I'll give you a good use case there is we've had clients who will automatically source out into the third-party databases and bring everybody in that fits a specific profile, and then they'll automatically send them invites to either join a talent network or apply for a specific job. But again, they're using the same technology to do in a high volume setting what headhunters might use to do in a purple squirrel setting, right? So three very distinct use cases, and those three use cases all require a CRM tool and specific CRM strategies.
Yeah, and I think also, Stephen, I think working together, you should be working towards supporting all of the above, with your CRM efforts. But really understanding coming from where your immediate need is and what you're trying to accomplish, I think is absolutely on point.
And I think for folks on the line who may actually manage larger recruiting operations teams, you might start to get some desire out of specialized recruiters or sourcers that saying, hey, listen, we really need a CRM tool. Whereas the volume folks might not really realize that CRM can actually meet that use case as well. And so we all in large organizations will come in and work with a very small team when the reality is that the tools and the strategies could be applied across a much wider group of folks within that organization. So as you begin to develop some strategies for using CRM, these are some important points to remember. So first of all, you want to develop and grow an overall talent pool. And you want this to be proprietary, right? This is your data. You spend a lot of money for third-party data. Some of and it doesn't matter where you're spending that money. If it's on, one of the older networks that we all know, like Monster, Career Builder, and Dice, and eFinancial Careers. If it's within LinkedIn, it doesn't matter who you're paying tons of money to. The important thing is for you to build a proprietary pool that you can organize and manage and grow and mature. Secondly, you want to be able to segment that into, whether you call it a pipeline or a talent network, etc. And there are several different ways to do that, but the reality is, just to be very simple, you may want to organize it around, job families, skill sets, and locations, or seniority, right, or function, right, so that you can segment in pipelines so that as you begin to develop communications, you know where you're sending those communications. You want to be able to implement talent networks and align those with those pipelines. So we should probably have had a definition here as well, Ian, but what from our perspective is a talent network, it's an opt-in, right, talent network, meaning you give your candidates the ability to either opt into a talent network instead of applying for a job, or allow their data to be synchronized into your talent network after they've applied for a job. Preferably, you don't force them into double entry to do that. There's an integration there so that it's seamless and it works well. But you want to be able to build those talent networks. And the nice thing about a talent network is this is somebody who's actually opted in because they have a level of interest in your organization. So you want to implement talent networks, align that with your pipeline strategy. Next, you want to share internal and external sourcing across your recruiters and sourcers. And we should just take a brief moment here. We're not simply talking about internal candidates, but we're talking about your internal data source. So let's say you're using an applicant tracking system. As people apply for jobs in that applicant tracking system, now that we consider that to be your internal data. Your external data is data on folks that maybe you know yet, maybe you don't know yet, they haven't applied for a job yet. You might be sourcing them now, or you may have sourced them in the past and have them in your database, but you want to share all of that data across the entire organization and be able to see how that data relates to each other. Third, and then you want to engage your talent pipelines with relevant content. right? So there's a number of different ways to do that. Some tools that kind of sort of play in the CRM space literally have what I would call job recommendation engines, and these have been around for 20 years, right? Tell me every time a job opens with my job, family, and my location, right? I find that as people get more and more of those job recommendations, they kind of tend to go, into your junk file, etc. So how do you develop a more engaging email and marketing campaign to engage your talent pipeline with either keep warm messages or educational messages and direct invites to apply for jobs. We've got a client who will send out messages at different holidays for different groups of people. So say around Veterans Day, to see if they can reach out to the veterans that they have in their talent network. Again, just a good way to but in order to do that, they've got to have that talent pool, they've got to be able to segment it, and they've got to be able to engage them, right? And I think what's most important, particularly for operations folks, is to be able to standardize that approach, measure it, right? Do you have a 360-degree measurement so you see the emails that are going out, the content that's going out, the candidates that are coming back, the activities that are being taken? Can you see the results of your team? So can you standardize, measure, and then refine those activities once you see the results?
Right, and then so organizations that are typically looking to implement this kind of more sophisticated and strategic CRM, we find fall between sort of level 2 and level 3 within our CRM capability model here. So you can see everything going from basic to functional to modern to optimize, and really it's about setting up that outbound sourcing, having a strategy and a mandate to become more proactive in your recruiting and less reliant on external sources, and really implementing things like talent networks, being more proactive with email outreach, getting recruiters involved more in sourcing activities as opposed to just solid dedicated sourcers, and typically move up the chain here. The more optimized you get, going to that level 4 level, it really has to do with how operationalized your efforts become, the strategies that you put into place. So are you measuring it, are you optimizing it, and really getting high quality data to then standardize that across your organization. So these slides will be available. So if you, I realize the type is very small, so we will make these slides available if you want to look at these later. So this is sort of the key practices portion of the presentation. And that's where we really kind of break down kind of what we see in each of these areas that we talked about key things you can kind of be thinking about, put into practice immediately, or be putting into your overall sort of strategy as you're looking to transform what you're doing. So the first one is enhance your ATS, Stephen, and you kind of talked about sort of the internal and external data. It really has everything to do with tying into your ATS, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And it really is both. It's probably threefold, right? It's data, it's functionality, and it's process, right? So if you really think about how you use your ATS, regardless of what platform you're on, you might be using a PeopleSoft or an Oracle or Taleo platform, or some other ATS. Any of those platforms are going to be have a different level of functionality. There's going to be differences across those, but for me, the bigger difference than the functionality within an ATS is the data and the process, right? So why are you using the data? What are the processes that you're using? And the ATS is perfect for doing what it's meant to do, which is managing that application process from beginning, from application all the way through, hopefully, to onboarding, right? And where CRM comes in is in those marketing capabilities, the sourcing and the marketing capabilities. And so by bringing in an external CRM solution, you're actually enhancing your ATS rather than overriding your ATS, and it gives it gives your organization a whole lot more flexibility on the sourcing and marketing front. And so I think it's really important that the ATS be integrated into your CRM platform in a very deep way, and that means bringing job data over from your ATS so that you've got content for marketing. It means synchronizing your past applicants so you can go find those silver medalists. It's really it's that level of integration so that you can push your capabilities as an organization even further than what your ATS is able to allow you to do.
And then grow your pool. Obviously, we talked about establishing a centralized pool, and really just coming out from the marketing angle, which is my background. My marketing database is everything. It is where 99% of our new customers come from. And I think with recruiting, it's a very analogous situation, is that you really need to make that a priority within your organization, centralizing and growing that talent pool, because it's kind of the top level measure about how healthy your activities are. Are you getting more interested candidates into your overall pool?
Yeah, Ian, I think that's well said, and I think we've really pushed it already to this point. It's that your proprietary database. This is going to be the differentiator for you in terms of how quickly you can begin to get candidates into your pipeline, and how you can shorten that time to fill, and also how you can increase your quality of hire, because you're building a centralized talent pool of people who are hopefully already sort of, I don't want to say fully pre-screened, but at least you got a pre-qualification going on, meaning that they're within your targeted desires, and that they are interested in you, and you're much further down the road.
And then don't forget talent networks. I think we defined the talent network earlier. You're bringing people in through a talent network on your website. And then it becomes really, Stephen, important then to map back as you're bringing them on, and they're expressing where their desires are in terms of their career, that it should map back to pipelines that are within that you're managing within your CRM, so they flow smoothly into those pipelines. Correct?
I think this is the area where a lot of companies sort of fall down a little bit, and there's a couple of areas. So first of all, that third point there says get more data from passive candidates. It's difficult to do if you don't have a nicely integrated mobile platform to do that, and you've all done it, right? We're all in the same field, so I know we apply for each other's jobs just to see what the experience is like to apply for a job, and then you're forced to fill out a quick little data sheet so you can join their talent network first. And then, on the customer side, that data sheet doesn't give you a whole lot of information: first name, last name, email address, maybe a specific job family. It doesn't give you near the kind of data that a full LinkedIn social profile or resume is going to offer. So I think, as much as possible, if you can get full resume details, so you can do a much better job at segmenting and looking at a full data. And then I think that the last one there too is mapping them appropriately to talent networks, to the talent pipelines. It's all about that segmentation. We all get emails from companies asking us to apply for jobs that just aren't anywhere near what we do, and that's because those companies aren't doing a great job at mapping their talent networks to their talent pipelines and segmenting that data.
That ultimately is a brand issue, right? Because if people are wanting to engage with you, and then you reach back out to them as if you don't know who they are, that really reflects on your brand in kind of a very fundamental way. And then integrating your ATS, if you want to sit out and look out across your entire potential pool of candidates to hire from, and you say, okay, I see them all, except I don't have my talent network in there, or except I don't have my past applicants in there, you're really not able to do strategic CRM. You're able to do CRM, you're able to source from a strategic pool, but it's not holistic. And I think that becomes a really big thing when you're out there trying to be strategic about your potential candidates.
Yeah, absolutely. It also gives you some very key data. So if your CRM tool is tightly integrated with your ATS, just from a candidate data perspective alone, as you're outsourcing, so for instance, our tool will help you go out and source in real time out to the major databases, et cetera. It's nice to know whether or not you already have that candidate in your database, so that you don't have to pay that extra credit to Monster or eFinancial Careers to pull that data down again. Or maybe you see that the application was actually 2 years old, so you go ahead and pay for the download anyway. But at least you're getting extra data from from your ATS, and so it really helps in terms of leveraging your database, number one, so you're not paying for data twice, understanding the strength of your database, and also a little bit of that branding message again. So the last thing you want to do is send somebody out an email that they've been actively involved in your candidate database. You just didn't know because you didn't see that data. So there's all sorts of very important reasons to go for a really deep, tight integration with your ATS, and we're able to provide really deep two-way integration into the PeopleSoft, to the Oracle iRecruit, and into the Taleo stacks specifically. And other ATSs, we have a level of integration that will also help drive some very key value.
And then be proprietary, right? And I know you love this one, Stephen, because you love the concept of being able to go out there and source, and as you're sourcing, you keep that information, and it becomes a key asset for your recruiting organization.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's your differentiator right there.
So as you're going out, you're searching resumes, you're searching LinkedIn candidates, you're coming back from a career fair, all of that stuff goes into your centralized talent pool, and it becomes yours, and it gets more and more valuable year in and year out. And then segment your talent pools. We've touched on this. The kinds of things you want to segment for by skills, by experience, by location, as Stephen said, by level, and even sort of making segmentation and data gathering part of your overall candidate interaction. The more information you can gather about a candidate, the great thing about CRM is it's designed to put that information into use as you reach out, as you segment, as you search for candidates in the future. So segmentation is huge.
Yeah, and this is both a sort of a business strategy as well as a technology strategy. So if you can define the types of candidates you're looking for the types of positions, then that's going to inform your search, right? So if you think of particularly if you're looking to do some more automated searching and automated segmentation, you want to do a really good job at defining who those folks are, so it doesn't look like you're not putting any effort into it when those emails go out. And again, if you're using a CRM tool that pulls in the entire resume, now you've got all of that data to use, so that the technology, and if you've got a really good semantic search technology, you'll be able to segment on all of the data that's in the resume, not just those one or two key data elements that you ask somebody when they apply for your talent network. So segmentation is first of all the business strategy, and then secondly you want the tools to be able to segment to the levels that you're interested in.
And then heat your talent pool, right? So you've got your talent pool, you've got it filled in. It's going to get cold, and algae's going to grow, and nothing's going to happen, and there's going to be no life in your pool unless you engage with that. Correct, Stephen? I mean, you've got to reach out.
Yeah, this is terrible. So I started as a headhunter many years ago, and I dare I say I'm old enough to have started just before the internet resumes started to come online. And I was with a client 2 years ago that was bringing in literally millions of candidates into this CRM database, and even this past year I've spoken to 2 clients that would say, well, I'm not sure I want to bring all my past applicants into the database. That data is old, it's stale. Right? And you talk to recruiters and they want to find the freshest candidate who's not looking for a job but is available immediately and meets all of my requirements, right? Isn't that the person that the recruiter is going for? Well, that doesn't happen by accident, does it? It happens because you are building that talent pool over time and communicating and keeping them not only warm but fresh. right? So so my client had the millions of resumes. I said, you know, if I could just take your database and go back to the headhunter agency I worked for, I could make a ton of money because, you know, that past data, if you really properly manage it and grow it and mature it, you know, can really deliver a lot of results. So what they found is that their recruiters didn't want to use the old data to go find people to apply for current jobs, but their recruitment marketers took it upon themselves to get that data refreshed. So they began a campaign of sending mass emails out to the older data segments and say, hey, there are great things happening at our company. You know, you've moved on over the years. We'd love to hear from you. Here's a link to our talent network. And then when they click that link to pull in their latest LinkedIn profile or upload their most recent resume, you know, now they've got the fresh data, right? So again, it goes back to that slide that we talked about in terms of the three strategies. Are you looking to, you know, build and mature the database? Are you looking to fill a current opening with a purple squirrel, or are you looking to manage high volume, right? So it goes to that.
Okay, and then you want to integrate your sourcing. I mean, so a lot of times we talk about CRM, people are basically talking about that marketing side of it and that sort of attraction side of it, where you're sending out emails and building interest and getting people to respond. But it really supports the more sales side of things, which is going out and you've got this great source of candidates. So go out there and tap it and mine it and get the value out of it, looking for specific or, as you said, high volume positions as well. The technology really works for multiple different use cases.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the sourcing side is so important because, you know, we said first thing you want to do is create that proprietary database. You can't do that unless you have a mechanism to go out and find data, capture it, and bring it back as simply as possible, certainly as automated as possible. And it's not going to always be you know, 100% automated. So certainly you want to look for a CRM tool that's going to give you federated search into, you know, as many of the integrated third-party databases as possible. But you also want a tool that's going to allow you to support your other sourcing efforts and quickly get that data into the system as well. So not only, you know, where are the when you look at the CRM tool, you not only want to ask, you know, what databases are integrated into the sourcing mechanism, but then how simple is it if I am using another source to get that data into my CRM so that I can begin using that data to build pipelines. So that might come from, you know, other business directories. It may come from LinkedIn. It may come from you know, events that you're attending, or you know, Google searches that your recruiters are doing. Regardless of where the sources come from, you want a way to quickly get them in, tag them, and get them into your talent pipeline so you don't lose all of that effort.
And then we talked about integration with the ATS. How great would it be if you could instantly tap in and get those people that we sort of call silver medalists, you know, the people that have maybe come close to getting a job, probably would have hired them if you had additional opportunities open, but didn't quite make it. Tap your silver medalists, right, Stephen?
Yeah, and you know, I've said this before from a business perspective, but let me just jump in here from a technology perspective. So when we talk about integrating the ATS for this particular purpose, it's not going to give me what I need if all I can do with my ATS is get a bunch of resumes in, right? So I might be able to import, you know, dump out of my ATS, let's say, you know, 500,000 resumes and import them into my CRM tool so that I can search them. That only gets me about halfway there. If you have a CRM tool that's deeply integrated with your ATS, now you can start taking a look at the metadata, the process data. Show me all candidates that made it through to a second interview stage, because that's where I'm going to build my pipelines, because I know those folks were good enough to get through the initial screens, you know, from the get-go. So that's just a quick example of, you know, how important it is to have that that ATS data to help you, you know, find the people you're looking for.
And this sort of speaks to what your organizational imperative is and sort of what you want to be as an organization. Are you proactive, you know, making search the first thing you go to as opposed to sort of a last resort or a secondary resort?
Yeah, I think this is really key, right? Um, of course, when I look at our entire platform, you know, if we can get jobs out to the market automatically without a recruiter touching them, great. At least we've got the job advertisement out there. But let's just think about that for a moment. Even if I can post immediately to an Indeed or a Career Builder, I still have to wait for the people who are interested and qualified to find that job and apply for the job. And it may take 24, 48, 36 hours before we begin to see applicants coming in from that marketing effort, no matter how quick and painless that marketing effort is. But if I jump into my CRM and I run a quick search for a segmented database of people who may be qualified to fill that role and send them out a quick email, that's going to take me all of 5 minutes, and I'm gonna start to see applicants onto that job much quicker. So this idea of search first, it's almost counterintuitive, because in the past we always just posted first, and then when we didn't get the right applicants, then we started to turn up the the sourcing aspect. So this is almost do that search first, send that quick email out to invite to apply, and then then you can go deeper and wider and broader.
And that's the value of the CRM, right? Every month you've got additional candidates that you've been bringing in through your talent networks, through job advertisements across your organizations, across multiple recruiters. It's a new database every month because you've got new people in there. So that search is going to yield you more and more people, or more and more relevant people, as your talent pool evolves. So take advantage of it.
I think it's a really good brand and marketing angle too, Ian. Job recommendation engines are one thing, right? Because I sign up and say, send me HR jobs in St. Louis, right? And I can get those, and I know that they're just coming out of a system. When I have a recruiter that's actually segmenting and taking the time to send out an email, or to craft that email, send it out, I know they're sending it out to more people than me, but at least I know that I've come up in a relevant search, that there's a level of interest there, and I think that really changes the response rate as well.
Good point. Feed your pipelines. Build lists and folders for high demand. I mean, you know what jobs you're always recruiting for, frequently recruiting for. So the idea there of having those ready pipelines, and then measuring those, right? Because you want to understand, like, we hire a lot of engineers in a certain discipline. Well, we can monitor those pipelines, right? And understand, do we have enough? Do we have a growing pipeline of people in that area? Because we know we're going to need them, or whether it's retail help, or more high turnover positions, et cetera.
And you can do this as just sort of the normal course of your routine as a sourcer. As you find people and say, well, they're not quite right for the job I'm working on now, but let me push them into that folder, or into these 3 folders, because they're right for 3 different pipelines. You can just kind of make that as a part of your routine. But you can also build this into an automated process. So, bringing in fresh data from the third-party databases. And I'll give you a good example. You might pay for 20,000 views on Monster, and your recruiters, as active as they are, might only look at 12,000. What are you doing with the extra 8,000? Wouldn't it be great if you had a CRM tool that could then go out on its own and just pull in relevant data for your specific pipelines, right? And burn up that extra 8,000 views, so you don't leave them on the table, but helps feed your pipeline as well. So both from a routine process perspective, but also then from a more strategic data perspective, feed the pipelines.
Right, and then you don't need those extra 8,000 in the future, because again, you own them.
Yeah, after a while, you're going to get them all in, right? Absolutely.
And then search passive candidates. Again, this comes back to right, bringing your talent networks into holistically your talent pool. It includes your networks, includes your external sources, the people that you've already brought in through other channels, as well as your ATS. It's what your talent network is there to do. But I think a lot of people, are working with talent networks sort of as an island. And again, you get those multiple tools that you're kind of sourcing from, or tapping for different particular activities, whether that's mass email campaigns or whether that's direct sourcing, but they're just not working together.
Well, I think you're absolutely correct. We put them out there as an opt-in, and we say, okay, whoever comes in is going to come in, but they can really be used as a strategic tool as well. So let's say, for sake of argument, I do a lot of sourcing in LinkedIn because there's a lot of business contacts in LinkedIn. But as a recruiter, I know that there's not a lot of contact data in LinkedIn, right? So I learn a lot about somebody, but it's very difficult to reach out to them unless I'm just simply going to send them a quick in-mail that has an open rate of somewhere around, a 1 in 4 to 1 in 5, right? But if I can do that level of sourcing into some of those alternative data sources, and I can send a nicely crafted email or a nicely crafted in-mail in the case of LinkedIn with a link to my talent community. Now all I'm asking that person to do is use their LinkedIn profile or use their resume to just say, hey, here's my data. I might be interested in talking at some point. And now you're using that talent network as a very active rather than passive way to go after passive candidates, right? So it can really be used strategically.
And referrals, obviously, some of the best sources of hires, depending on where they come from, employee referrals. As you're building your talent pool, that should be a big part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Almost goes without saying, right? Except to say this. It's really important to understand, and I don't care what if you have an employee referral program, if you pay, if you don't pay, if you have if you're sophisticated, if you're not sophisticated, where is that data sitting, right? If you're not collecting the referrals in a way that feeds your pipelines in the CRM, then again, you're going to lose the value of those referrals over time. So I think it's really important to use your CRM and your referral program together.
Yeah, and it comes back to that same thing. The title of the presentation is Strategic CRM, and I think, again, we're focusing a lot on silos of activities that are getting us down the road. It's great to have an employee referral program, but and it's great to have a talent network, and it's great to have your ATS, past candidate data, but those silos can be so much more powerful if you're looking at them holistically, because then as we'll get down the road here, talk a little bit more about operationalizing this stuff, you really get a holistic view of where your results are. You can measure everything and begin to really operationalize across your entire recruiting organization about where they should be going and what are the best kinds of practices for getting certain kinds of candidates. So that's a recurring theme in everything we're talking about. You probably hear it again as we go across the slides. So then search, send, and measure. This is all about being really active in using your tools. I know within telemetry, one of the things we do is we measure recruiter activity. So you can sort of see what specific recruiters and sourcers are doing so that you can then begin to sort of say, what are the best activities that are giving us the best result by region, by discipline, and then model that across your organization to others. So if you're not actively in there searching and sending out emails and measuring the response, then you're really not able to tap into better sources of getting candidates for specific jobs or better practices, better ways of doing things. So it's really all about being active and using the tool.
Yeah, and I think the whole idea of sending out communications and measuring that. Number one, creating those communications, getting them sent out needs to be really simple. A lot of our clients are doing A/B testing on some of these emails, so they'll send out maybe different marketing messages or different approaches and try to see what kind of results they're getting back, both from an open rate as well as a response to the call to action rate, right? So it's somebody, and a lot of times the recruiters are just pushing forward their job. Somebody has to be sitting in the background, taking a look at the results and trying to refine the approach as they continue.
And always be sourcing, right? Always open, high turnover positions, running regular campaigns. The idea there is everything you're doing, whether you're specifically sourcing or not, when you've got everything centralized, right, Stephen, you're able to sort of harness the activities of the team to then be adding value to that tool and continually using that tool.
Yeah, and I would even say since the key theme here is strategic, um, how do you open up the rest of your organization to always be sourcing, right? Does your CRM tool give you a relatively simple way for non-users to get data into the system? So for instance, can you set up automated emails so that if some of your senior managers are finding people that they'd like to keep warm, that they could just send it in and have that person automatically added to a specific pipeline, for instance, right? So that it's not just your sourcing team, but also your entire organization that always needs to be sourcing, getting that data into a system so that your sourcing and recruitment team, who are really tasked with turning those into applicants and hires, have the data in one place.
And then I touched on it before, standardize and develop best practices. And the great thing about strategically approaching CRM, as I touched on, is that ability to then have everything sort of centralized and measured, and everybody using the same platform. And then you can then leverage those practices, those results, those sources. You can leverage that knowledge procedurally across your entire organization, where you simply can't do it if you're operating multiple different sort of technical approaches to various portions of sourcing in CRM.
I think that's an important point, Ian, particularly for those that are managing recruitment operations in larger organizations. But I would also kind of throw out the caveat that as you standardize these processes, you really want to start with simple processes. I have worked with a couple of clients who are very highly process oriented and developed probably 8 or 9 step processes for something that could be done in 3 steps, right? And so you want to be standardized, but you also want to be simple, so that you can measure what works.
Good point. And then measure everything. Again, set up your key success criteria and monitor these metrics frequently. So these are some of the metrics. So we want you to go over that we recommend sort of at a high level. It's a long list, and it's certainly specific to your own organization, but these are sort of some high level areas to focus on.
Yeah, and I think 2 things, right? So from a business perspective, the talent pool growth is absolutely key. Not only its overall growth, but also is it growing in the key areas. So how you're bringing data into the system so that you can measure that is going to be absolutely critical. So that's probably one of the most important areas to measure from an overall business perspective. Now, usage is really important to measure because you're setting some expectations across your team that you believe this new direct sourcing capability is going to drive results, and you want to be able to make sure that that number one, they're doing those activities so that you can appropriately measure the results in the end. But in any change in the organization, it's often difficult to get people to kind of sign on to that change. So usage helps you in your change management, but then it also helps you so that you don't force people to do activities that aren't actually driving results, right? So use is important, and then also engagement, right? So how often are people receiving messages? Are they receiving messages too often, or not often enough? Can you monitor those open and click rates? Do you have an appropriate level of ability to track how many people unsubscribe and from what types of messages, etc. So just a couple of those areas that you may want to report on. Obviously, source is another one we didn't put in here, but it's sort of a given, and that's how are your sources working for you. So if you're pulling tons of resumes down from Monster, are they ultimately ending up as hires because you've sent emails and invites to apply, or are you getting more from Indeed and Beyond.com than you are from Career Builder, right, etc. So you can continue to match that. And throw it out there again too is LinkedIn. So a lot of my clients are saying X percentage of their hires are coming from LinkedIn, and yet most of their work there is in the sourcing work. So how can you measure that? How do you bring that data in a way that that you can appropriately measure it as well as leverage it?
and compare it across everything, right?
Yeah.
So we're getting into the end. Stephen, you've mentioned clients a lot. Just a couple of, we recently were at the Oracle HCM Users Group conference, and we had a couple of clients there who were presenters who talked a little bit about their results in implementing some of these more strategic CRM functions. And Stephen, I'll let you kind of speak to them, but the first one was Seagate, and maybe talk about some of the results that they've seen.
Yeah, I think that the slide speaks for itself. If you want to look at talent pool increased over 86% since the implementation, and they did not have a large talent pool. So I can tell you they didn't bring a whole lot of data over from their Taleo system, and so that's been some very hard work on the part of their sourcers. So they're really using the system very strategically, both from a sourcing perspective, building talent pipelines. They're using it in their campus recruitment area, and they're seeing now, as they're in full swing, an overall growth of 10% per month. They've started very slow with recruiter adoption, and primarily, and I'm going to say this just as a caveat, primarily because they didn't have a lot of data in there, right? And so Source and CRM was really data driven, and now that they've got some decent data in the system, they've got very good recruiter adoption, and they're maximizing their external database candidates. So, for instance, they use one particular external database, and they were looking for a specific skill set, and they realized, well, you know what, this is a very constrained skill set, and so they started to use all of their leftover credits to go into that database just to pull out that specific constrained skill set. And after a couple of months of using their unused credits to go after that skill set, they found out that it had a very strong pipeline, and may very well have 90% of the potential candidates in that specific area in their proprietary database. So they've been very strategic in terms of how use specifically the CRM tool. Royal Bank of Scotland is another client. This one's dear to my heart.
Steve, I just want to jump in. I want to jump in and say, this was an organization, Seagate, that started with, we talked about at the beginning, starting with sort of what you're trying to accomplish, as opposed to sort of what tool should I choose. And really, their key things that they wanted to accomplish is they wanted to get their recruiters. They don't have dedicated sourcers, but they have, I want to say, 85 recruiters. They wanted them more proactively sourcing. They wanted to be more proactive. They're an organization that hires a lot of manufacturing talent and handles a lot of very specific engineering talent. There's many jobs that there may be only one person in the world that can do at Seagate. So they wanted to get out ahead of that. And that was the impetus for them going out looking for CRM as a solution. And so they kind of came to these results, getting more recruiters involved in the sourcing process, and then giving them a tool that they, as Stephen said, there's good data in there to source from, and allowing them to get out ahead of their talent needs. So I didn't mean to cut you off there, Stephen, but just
well, not at all. But it brings us right back to that slide of the what are the three areas of focus, and while all three are important for them when they came on board, their number one area of focus was building that talent pool, right? And they knew that it was going to be, they were going to have to put some time into it before they started to see results on the hiring side, and they took that time and they built a really good talent pool up. Now, Royal Bank of Scotland is a PeopleSoft client, and they actually moved 3 years ago from a point solution for recruiting to PeopleSoft. As a matter of fact, I was on the team when they moved. This is where I worked prior to telemetry, and so currently have over 100,000 employees. About 400 people are actually in the system right now. But in reality, from a sourcing perspective, they've got a small team that sources for some of the more difficult to find and business critical positions. And so they've got a sourcing team that's supporting the larger recruitment team. And then they've also got a group of marketers who work to send out a very targeted marketing campaign. So their talent pool, and again, they started with a relatively small pool. It's a UK-based company, so with data privacy rules, they had been doing a pretty good job at getting rid of their database after 2 years. So they came in with about 2 years worth of data, but it's grown 88% in the probably 2 years that they've actually been fully live with the system, and they're still purging on the backside, right? So so they continue to grow, and they've been able to reduce their advertising spend by literally millions of pounds, and that's not just and that's not agency spend, right? So the process pushed a lot of the agency spend off. If you don't let people go out to agencies, you tend to drop that. But what they were doing instead was spending a lot of money on pay-per-click advertising and doing other sorts of very expensive advertising. So they've been able to eliminate about 75% of the advertising budget because they've got a pool of people that are proactively out there searching and inviting people to apply.
All right, so we've run a little bit long, everybody. I just want to sort of wrap up and say we may not be able to get to questions, but we definitely will follow up individually. We do have a number of questions here. But you can learn more about our sourcing and CRM solution for Oracle, PeopleSoft, and iRecruitment at telemetry.com. You can feel free to if you'd like to see the system, there's an easy way there to request a demo, and we'd be happy to show it to you. As well. We will follow up with an email that will give you additional. We'll give you the slides, give you a recording of the presentation, so that will be in your email box. And we got 2 minutes here, so maybe we can get to a couple of the questions. Let's see. Are you able to extract data from previous CRM system if a client were to be interested in your services?
Yes, I can answer that. I've been involved in a lot of implementations, so I understand this, and this is a key. So, you know, the bigger question is going to be whether or not that data can come out. But once that data is out, it's very easy for us to upload it into our system. So there's a two-part question. Yes, we can pull the data in, and then we'd have to talk to you about what system specifically you're using and how the data, you know, what. First of all, how you get the data out and what it looks like when it comes out. So it's either going to be, you know, a pretty clear dump of all of the resume data, or if they can get it out to a better XML file, then we can pull in some of the metadata as well. But we can definitely talk about that.
Okay, and we do have a hard stop at 11, so I am going to end it here. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Thanks, Stephen, for doing the lion's share of the presentation. And everybody have a great day. And again, go to telemetry.com if you have any additional questions.
Thanks, Ian.